Shelby Rodriguez-Edwards. I'm the district wildlife biologist for 4 separate counties, so Smith County, Wood County, Titus, and Franklin. So I cover a lot of ground, but I do a lot of work in Smith and Wood. I went to the University of Texas at Tyler for both my bachelor's and master's and got a biology degree in both of those. And then I did lots of internships with the agency, and I got hired on for this district position. So in graduate school, I really focused a lot on herpetofauna, so reptiles and amphibians. So this is always a really fun topic for me to get to talk about it again. So thanks for having me. So kind of getting into why herpetofauna, I always like to bring this up because I feel like it's really important. So herpetofauna is just a fancy term for reptiles and amphibians, and they are considered an indicator species, which is just a way of saying that if they are not found in an environment or they are found in that certain habitat, it's an indicator for the health of the overall habitat. Why is this so? They're a very sensitive species. They have that semi-permeable skin, so they can soak in a lot of things like pollutants in the water. They're really sensitive to those temperature changes. So they are a big indicator. So whenever we go out and sample, when I did that for grad school, we would see, okay, maybe we don't have a great diversity, or we don't have those species of salamander that would really show us that this is a healthy system. And a lot of it is due to habitat loss. With urbanization, with deforestation, you're getting an uptick of habitat loss. So they're losing these really sensitive ecosystems that they're used to, and they have no way to recover. So another thing about amphibians specifically is they are one of the most critically endangered species right now within the vertebrate species. So I think they're up to like a 41% loss. So they're pretty dire, and there's not actually a lot of research kind of covering those species. They're kind of underserved. And then I believe that reptiles are about like 21%. So they are pretty critical. I think birds are 13%, so not as drastic, but it's climbing every year. So what makes a good habitat? 4 different criterias. So food, shelter, moisture retention, right? They have to keep that semi-permeable membrane wet and moist to continue into these sites. Another is their breeding sites specifically. So some reptiles and amphibians have very specific needs. They're either generalist or they're specialist. So if they don't have these specific needs, they may or may not persist in those environments. So I added these 3 pictures just because it's 3 different turtle species, and they all are generalists with a little bit of specialist in them, where they might need, a special diet or a special habitat. So specifically this top one, it's a Mississippi mud turtle. It's one of my favorite turtles. They actually eat crayfish, which is really cool, and they really, really need a good layer of leaf litter. So with reptiles, they don't really care about the leaf litter as much, but this reptile does. And then this is an eastern box turtle over here. It's a male because it's all red, so the coloration on them changes a little bit based off of male, female. And they are fully terrestrial. So they're technically a tortoise, and they don't really use water like those other 2 species. So then how do herpetofauna and native plants mesh? Why does it really matter? Well, in the herpetofauna community, we call it microhabitats. So think about these big habitats, and these small little creatures are really relying on small environments, or those microhabitats. They need to be able to temperature regulate. That's a big thing for them. Since they can't do it themselves, they're cold-blooded. they need to be able to do this through basking and other techniques to change and regulate their temperature. And then humidity control kind of goes hand in hand with that as well. And I think this is a really fun species. So Texas is really neat, and we have lots of really cool salamanders, especially in East Texas. So this is a marbled salamander. They're very elusive. They're really hard to find, like most of our salamander species. But I just think that they're just so pretty and they're so neat. So moving into kind of like the native of it all. So when you have native trees like oaks and pines, which is what's most common in our forested areas over here, they're going to drop their leaves, they're going to drop their needles, and they are going to create a layer on the forest floor called leaf litter, right? We all know it. So that is what they are relying on. How thick is that leaf litter or the pine needle litter? That's what's creating those microhabitats. For salamanders and newts, that layer is extremely, extremely important. They live most of their life in that leaf litter, in fallen bark or fallen trees, snags that have fallen on the forest floor. They're really relying on that for shelter. However, reptiles, they don't really have that semi-permeable skin. So for them, they don't really need that leaf litter. They don't really rely on it as much, besides maybe a few species like that Mississippi mud turtle, because they don't have semi-permeable skin. So when you have a big, pile of leaf litter, they're going underneath that, and that's what's keeping them moist and keeping that temperature retention and humidity. And then, with that whole microhabitat, think about food as well. How many times have you lifted up, leaf litter to see how much you have, or you've been raking up leaves and you see all the insects that are running around? Well, who do you think eats those insects? All of these reptiles and amphibians are. So it's a whole little habitat in a really big habitat. So I'm going to focus a little bit more on the amphibian side of things, and then we'll switch over to reptiles. So kind of talking more about that leaf litter, there's lots of white papers that I read when I was doing this, and I read in grad school, kind of talking more about that leaf litter component of everything. So they're shaping pretty much this whole deitral food web, which deitral just means the decomposers. So salamanders are a critical decomposer. They're using that habitat, they're using the insects, and they are creating that stable environment. And what's neat too is those salamanders are the top predator of this system. They're kind of running this system. So think of them kind of as a keystone species. Without them in that system, these insects aren't going to be eaten, they're going to be overproduced. You're not going to have a fast breakdown of leaf litter, and things are not going to decompose the way that they are supposed to, which can completely mess up the whole nutrient cycling of everything. It's neat because there's a lot happening in these environments. Like this isn't just something that's happening, within 5 minutes. This is happening over years. This whole nutrient cycling, fungi coming in, insects coming through, and these salamanders. So something about salamanders too that they're so neat because they're so under-researched, but when they choose an area, they persist in that area for decades. Even species like Amphuma, they are fossorial, so they go under the ground, and that's where they live most of their life. A lot of these are like that. Mole salamanders are kind of like that as well. They're fossorial, so they spend most of their life down there. They come out to breed, and they're using these environments for a very short amount of time. But it's really neat to me. So they're the ecosystem engineers, which is just another term for a keystone species. Another aspect of it that I don't think a lot of people think about is the chemistry as well. So certain leaves are full of oils, tannins, toxins, and pivoting back to when we talked about how they have that semi-permeable skin, they can soak all of this up. So when they're in a forest that is mostly non-native species, they are not using these oils and tannins, and it's not soaking in the way that it's supposed to, so you won't really see them a lot in those areas. Most of the literature shows that they prefer more oak stands or mixed hardwood stands, which is really interesting, but the further deep east you go, they do utilize those longleaf pine stands that are still standing. We don't really have a lot of them now, but they do utilize them, and they like the extra acidity that's in that soil. So I've read a really neat paper as well on disturbance, because a big part of my job is burning. And when you think about, we're burning areas that have really dense leaf litter. So what are we doing when we burn off all of this leaf litter, and does it have a negative impact on the reptiles and amphibians? And it doesn't, which I thought was really neat, because they are using these areas that need a lot of that native leaf litter, and those native stands are the ones that we're mostly burning because they've been adapted to fire over time. And their paper actually showed that in more open canopy forested areas, there was a higher density of amphibians, which I thought was really neat, because it just kind of goes to show that fire on the landscape isn't necessarily a bad thing for all things. And through the decades of Smokey the Bear, and everybody's scared of fire, and fire suppression really became a part of the culture. Kind of going back to that, this research is showing it's not necessarily a bad thing, and they actually are liking that more open, area with more diverse native plants on the forest floor. And they're kind of shying away from those places that are more overgrown. There's less ground cover for them to escape to. So I thought that was really neat. Kind of moving on to the reptile aspect. So reptiles, like I said, they don't really care about the leaf litter. They care more about the habitat as a whole. Most of our species are generalists, but Texas is really awesome, and we have 80 plus different snake species and 50 plus different lizard species. So we are really diverse in Texas. We are one of the most diverse places in the United States for reptiles and amphibians. And then when you're kind of zooming into the aspect of East Texas, it's even more so, because we have all of these niche areas in East Texas that certain species will persist and specialize in, which I thought was just so neat, because a lot of people discount East Texas for having a high amount of diversity, and here we are with the most amount of diversity for herpetofauna. So where snakes and lizards are a little bit different is when they are in these environments, they are using the bark, they're using logs, and they're wanting to kind of climb vertically to get away from predators, to find prey. So your bird nests, small rodents, things like that. And then they're also using that the trees for their thermoregulation as well. And then some of them prefer microhabitats, some of them don't. It just kind of depends. So this is a cottonmouth, and super common in this area, right? And they prefer edge habitat. So if you're by a pond, they want to be in that area in between the water and where your forest starts. So you'll see them a lot of the times coiled up in those areas. That's what they really like. So they're one of those species that maybe has a little bit different of a need than some other ones. So a lot of our, terrestrial snakes, they like to climb trees, but why? We kind of mentioned that. Why are they climbing? For thermoregulation, for food, and to escape. But some of them actually use it, for their day-to-day life. They're specialists. So the Texas spiny lizard, you can see in this photo down here, they blend in really, really well. So they have specific trees that they like, and they want to be in that environment so that they blend in, they can easily forage, they can easily escape, and that's where you'll mostly see them. So those guys are bark specialists, which I meant just name. Oop, I went too far. And then, there's some snake species. I have one at the office. I didn't bring it today. I should have. But up in the corner, it's a Louisiana milk snake. So, like I mentioned, these snakes, most of the time, there's not a lot of research done on them. So we don't know a lot about them. But anytime I've ever found a Louisiana milk snake, they're in the bark of a tree, which I think is really neat. So they're super elusive. They're super rare to find out in the habitat. But we were cutting down trees out at Caddo Wildlife Management area, and we found this guy. Our sawyer was cutting the tree down. Some of the bark slewed off, and it was a big pine, and it was a dead pine. Bark slewed off as he's cutting, and that snake falls on his hand. And I'm sure y'all know how that probably went over, because he just sees those colors, and you're not processing that those are okay colors in that combination. Red is on black in this scenario, but he didn't see that, so he dropped that saw so quick. But these guys are pretty docile, and they're really rare, and they're really neat, and I would consider more of that cryptic species. So they want to get into these little tiny places and stay there. They're also fully nocturnal, which is probably why, it fell out, is it was sitting there dormant, and he cut it down, and it was probably sleeping, and that was that. But really neat on that. There's other species too that really rely on trees. So the western rat snakes that we have here too, you'll see them hanging around trees too, and they get a lot bigger than this little milk snake, but they really rely on those trees. So just to kind of go back through everything, all of these reptiles and amphibians are using different parts of these forested habitats, right? Whether it's pine, whether it's mixed hardwood, whether it is oak specific, they're using all aspects of this microhabitat to work. And when pieces of it are taken out, they're not functioning at their full capability. So it's really important to put fire on the landscape, manage your habitat in sound practice, and maybe throw in some surveys for some reptiles and amphibians so you know what you got on your property. But otherwise, that's all I have for you guys. Yeah.
Do they seem to be out more at the nighttime, or like the amphibians and such? I know reptiles you can be out in the middle of the
Yeah, reptiles, it varies drastically based off of the species and kind of what they're needing. So like the milk snake, you're probably never really gonna see them out during the day, but something like a green anole, you're probably going to see those sunning out on a tree pretty easily. The amphibians are a little bit different. They're a little bit more active at nighttime, but the salamanders are super, super elusive. Like when we were doing research, we really weren't finding them just out and about turning logs. We were finding juveniles in traps at nighttime. So it kind of goes back and forth. You could,
Is
but
there a bright green salamander? I found one in my kitchen once, and I was just curious.
salamander
You wouldn't leave.
in this area, no.
Oh, okay, I don't know, it's just some kind of lizardy thing.
Lizard, yes. A green anole, probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He wasn't wanting to leave, and I'm like, no, you can't live here.
Yep. So green anoles are pretty common in this area.
Okay.
Brown anoles too. But yeah, they kind of just depends on the species whether they're out and about. Any other questions?
What's the most important thing we can do or plant we can plant that can possibly help our reptile amphibians?
I think, keeping your forested areas open and have any of those native plants that come up in a forested area. Those bunch grasses would be great. Anywhere that they can easily go. I would also say, as those trees fall in your forest, leave them. Let them decompose naturally. It will take, 10 plus years for them to fully break down. But that is where a lot of your reptiles and amphibians are going to use.
So if we do lose I can't leave a whole tree.
Sure, you don't have to leave a whole
If I
tree.
lost a big limb, I could try to find some way to use that in
Sure.
my garden.
Sure, yeah.
So that it looks like something
Yeah.
that still can be a habitat.
Even I know people have done artificial logs as well, where they're hollow on the inside. You could even do that. Yeah, anything like that where they have, places to either go under or go inside of. Yeah.
What are the most common salamanders that we have?
We
I
have a
call
few.
it a skink. Is that what
So
you call it?
there's skinks as well,
Okay.
and I would lump them into the salamander species, even though they're technically a type of reptile. They're more of a lizard than they are an amphibian. However, they also have those same needs as a salamander. They need to be pretty moist, and they need a lot of leaf litter as well. And a lot of the time they burrow underneath that leaf litter. So what was it? What did you put? I'm sorry. I got on that and then I
Most common.
most
Most
common,
common,
yes.
I
Okay,
forgot.
so in our area, like here, what you can find is marbled salamanders, dwarf salamanders, dusky. Dusky's another one, which these were those photos for them. I'll go back. That's a dusky salamander right there.
I didn't know they had a chicken here.
And then this is a marbled.
That's pretty.
Yeah. And then
What is
here's
that?
that's another dusky.
Something I've heard of.
Yeah, so I would say those are the most common.
I'm not up on my reptiles and amphibians, so if you had to name like 5 of each, what would they be? Other than
For salamanders,
no, just the reptiles and then amphibians, like
the
you
most 5 common?
Yeah. Like,
Ooh, okay.
I mean, not I mean, just in general. Like he showed pictures of turtles and salamanders and snakes.
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably the 3 I know.
Yeah, yeah. So
what
I
are
would,
the others that are obvious that
So-
I'm not aware of?
you have your snakes, you have your salamanders, you have your turtles, you have your lizards. So this right here is a juvenile 5-line skink, and it's juvenile because it has that blue long tail. So as they get older, that blue tail kind of goes away a little bit. The color does. More lizards, green anole, and the Mediterranean house gecko, which I bet all of y'all have probably seen that one around your doors at night in the summer. Yeah, it has kind of like a collar and it's spotted, kind of like a light brown. Yeah, I guarantee most of y'all have seen those. I would say those are probably like the most common in this area. Snake-wise, of course, it's your copperheads, your cottonmouths, your rat snakes are gonna be really common. The milk snake's definitely not common at all. You probably, like, that one is one I've only seen 2 ever.
I just saw one.
Did you really?
Yes. I didn't realize how rare they were.
Yeah, they're very rare. Yeah,
That's so
their
cool.
population has declined bad. So, if you ever see one, yeah, that's a real treat. What's some other ones? Some green snakes, so super green colored. Those ones are common too, and they're really good for your property. They're gonna eat a lot of little critters. What else?
So when you say that blue is indicative of a juvenile,
Mhm.
will that always be true, or is there
For the
some-
5-line skink, yes.
Oh, just that.
Just the
particular
5-line
one.
skink, yes.
So is there a blue skink? I mean, I see blue ones a lot.
Yeah, we do too around our house.
Probably. Probably. I would.
Just
I'd have to see it.
Micro
Yeah.
gardens on.
Yeah. And it might be. It might
the
be
chemicals.
the 5-line skink. Honestly.
Well, some of them seem, I mean, not huge, but you know.
Those are pretty big.
Oh, okay.
They're pretty large.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look at the head next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Look and see stripes. So there's also a 7-line skink as well. So getting into the nitty gritty on whether you can count the stripes before it runs
Yeah.
off. But yeah, definitely probably a 5-line skink if I had to guess.
Okay, so then talk about the amphibians.
So what aspect of the amphibians?
I don't know, I found a tadpole in my pond.
Okay, so
Excited.
common amphibians that you would
Yeah.
see. So frogs. So right now frogs are breeding. We've kind of gotten past the southern leopard frog breeding. So that might be the tadpoles that you've been seeing. Or if you see egg masses right now, it's probably the southern leopard frogs, which they're the ones that do a little bit of a laugh call. So if you ever hear a bunch of like laughing in your tree, that's probably them. What month we're in? May. Bullfrogs are breeding right now too. So when they're in their breeding season, you might not hear them calling as much, which is pretty neat. So we would sample when we do our frog call surveys. We do them in February because that's kind of the beginning of their breeding season. We do another one in May and another one in June because they're breeding from February all the way up through the summer. And it's different species and they're kind of layering on who's breeding at what time. So spring peepers are also breeding in May, I believe. So they're the little beep, 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 beep. If you're ever out there and you hear that, that's them. Yeah.
When we were at the Tyler Prescribed Burn Festival, remember, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that gentleman that was speaking inside the little pavilion building.
Yes.
And I asked him, well, I told him that we didn't, on our property, we haven't seen hardly, I haven't seen any worms at all.
Hmm.
When we call the leaf bag, you don't see much of anything under there.
And I've done composting for like 20 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, that just would you don't put meat in there, it's just all vegetable and greens and stuff like that. Would it be beneficial to these creatures right here if we just started a compost pile, not really took care of it, but just let it rot and kept it watered, so to speak, because the compost that I have now is just so rich, and there's worms in it that are just humongous.
I wouldn't say no, because your frogs would probably definitely appreciate that, if they found it. But a lot of them are finding, these resources in their own, ecosystem, and they're not really having to rely on, being fed. And frogs especially are almost always generalist species. Like they can pretty much persist in anything, any kind of vernal pool, any kind of wetland, up, on the side of the road, like in a ditch. I mean, anywhere that they have water, they're gonna breed in, and their young are gonna come up, and they are interesting. They have, this 2-part life cycle where they're spending majority of it in the water, and then the second half they're kind of more terrestrial, going back in between. I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't think so. But the thing about, having property is, I always say try things. You never know what's going to work for your property, and there's not really a lot of harm in trying. So I would say try it if you're interested to see, if they start utilizing it.
The leaf litter is so thick out there. Sometimes I wonder if it's too thick.
Maybe, and I know for I know we've talked about burning.
Yeah.
So it might be beneficial if you burn through it and see within a few years, do some surveys to see if you see more diversity out there. Yeah, maybe that the leaf litter just needs a little bit more help decomposing.
Because even in some of the pine tree stacks that this guy had on the property, I mean, this pine is to the point where you touch it and it's just crumbles.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, but there's nothing. I haven't been able to see anything living within that little system, and it's a pile about the size of the seating right here. It's just perfect where it's decomposed.
Have you flipped logs at night?
No.
Try that, because you might find it at night more so. Yeah, make your wife do it. Yeah, just get a headlamp on and get a rod to flip your logs. Definitely don't reach down and flip your logs because you don't know what's under there, so you don't want to get bit by something.
And then would it be hard for some of these other little creatures like the?
No, yeah, that's a common practice is flipping. Just make sure you put it back, the way it was laying, just in case. Any other questions? Yeah.
Why do turtles wander a long ways away from the water?
They actually have a pretty large home range, so they can kind of travel, and kind of depending on, if a habitat is, too dense, so maybe there's a lot of turtles in one pond and they're just really fighting for resources. Yeah, they might leave that habitat and go to a neighboring habitat, and that's pretty common. Yeah, and they have a large home range, and depending on what kind of turtle it is, sometimes they are a singular species and they don't really congregate as more than one. So if we go back, so the box turtle, for example, like when they are roaming in a forest, they are completely by themselves, and the only time they see another box turtle is when they go to breed, and they're very territorial. So you'll see that with turtles a lot as well, is they'll run other males out of an area.
So what's the bottom turtle there?
Well, this one is just a red-eared slider. So that's one of your most common turtles in most pond systems. Yeah, they just eat little fish and macroinvertebrates that are on the bottom.
Yeah, that's the one that I see the most.
Yeah.
I wonder why they're wandering 300-400 feet.
Yeah, they roam. They roam.
What kind of range does the turtle have, like the box turtle?
Oh, like a box. I mean, miles. They can roam miles. So we did a study out at Caddo Wildlife Management Area, and we actually put trackers on box turtles, which is where this photo came from. So we use radio telemetry to find them, and every week we'd go back and see how far they moved. And I have to go back and see what the final findings were, because I only helped at the beginning, and I think that they did it for 2 years total. That biologist that's out there, Vanessa Neese, when she was there, she did that study. Yeah, and we'd find those things in crazy places where we did not see them the week prior, and we're like, why did you went way further than what we expected. So I'd say like 1 mile to 2 miles. Yeah.
Do they turn around and go back home at night, or do they just keep moving?
No, they just keep moving. Yeah. No. Yeah, so we'd find them in different places, and I don't think they would usually go back. Yeah. Yeah, until a male didn't like that they were in an area they shouldn't be in. Yeah.
Did it matter based on the sex of the turtles, or could you tell?
You can tell. You can tell whether they're male or female. We would sex them.
I mean, do mothers stay at home or?
No. So also with turtles, they won't revisit their their egg site. So once they have eggs, and they bury them, they leave them and they move on. Yeah, so they won't go back to it. And then those babies, they hatch and they go on. Yeah.
What is the best thing to do when you find one of those little babies? We found one and we had chickens and, I mean, I just put it outside of their reach, but I didn't know.
No, I mean, it's fine to move them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, they'll find their own home eventually. They'll all kind of disperse and go their own way. So you could move them. They're young enough that, you know, they'd probably still, you know, try and find where they want to be.
It's like on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
the chickens can-
Yeah, that's totally fine. For those smaller babies, that's always their big limiting factor is if something's gonna get them.
When you find one, there's probably more than I would assume.
Probably. Yeah, probably. I mean, their nests could be anywhere from 5 to 10 eggs. Yeah.
Is fish food harmful to their microenvironment? 'Cause they
Like
seem
if you're
to-
feeding them in a pond,
well, yeah, in a lake they feed the fish, and so the turtles seem to.
I probably wouldn't do it.
Well, I'm not doing
yeah,
it. But
no,
I can see the frequency of the turtles like uptick.
probably
and then,
getting used to people feeding
Yeah.
them. Yeah. At that point, it can be that's why we tell people don't really feed wildlife, because if they get used to it, then
Right.
you know that can be detrimental to them, because if they get so used to people feeding them, and this goes for all animals,
Right.
they get really used to something feeding them, they're gonna rely on that, and they are gonna lose that innate ability to hunt and forage and find resources. So,
Right.
yeah, I would say probably
Just
not,
curious.
but yeah. Anything else?
So if you're trying to have the right kind of habitat, they'll keep each other in check, so you're not overrunning too many of one thing or another.
Yeah. Yeah, especially those salamanders, they will keep, you know, that diutral habitat pretty well and good.
Those bright green ones you see on plants all the time in the
The
garden.
anoles.
Is that what they are?
Mhm.
Do they feed on the plant bugs?
Yep, they're gonna eat.
Aphids and stuff.
Yep,
and-
aphids, the silverfish,
Yeah.
any of those.
'cause
Yep,
that's
they'll
what
eat
I
them.
see the most
Yep.
of the time.
Yeah, flies, anything like that. You have a question?
I'm scared of the shell.
What happens to the shell?
I'm scared of it.
Oh, ants.
Oh, with ants? Yeah, not good. They probably won't make it, and fire ants are one of the more invasive species that we have here in Texas. I say feral hogs and fire ants. I mean, fire ants are kind of a huge reason why we don't have quail anymore. You know, they are a ground nesting bird, and fire ants really took down their population. So, I mean, anything like that. Also, I know it sounds crazy, but white-tailed deer fawns, they can kill fawns as well. So if a mom, you know, has their baby sit down, they're not going to move for anything. So, yeah, we've seen that too. So, a lot of animals like that. Fire ants are not great. So I'd say definitely stay on top of treating your fire ants if you have them. Anything else?
That's the big giant fire ant, but not,
Most of the ones here, yeah. Any of the ones that bite you,
that's all of
unfortunately, yeah. Anything else?
And what is your general advice for snakes? Just let them be and move
Let them be
back?
unless they are being a nuisance to you. So if you have chickens and you have rat snakes that get into your coop, definitely take care of it and move it. Sometimes I'd even say probably kill them, because they probably will come back consistently. But if you take them far enough out in the woods, they probably won't come back. You know, if you have small kids or grandkids and you have copperheads and cottonmouths, I'd say probably, you know, better safe than sorry on those, and get rid of them. I'm not saying like completely exterminate them. I'm just saying, you know, probably most of the people in this room have killed a snake, which is totally fine, and usually probably good for around your house. But if you have the capability to move them further away, I would do it. And a lot of people think, you know, snakes chase, but they really can't see all that well to where they'd want to chase you. They're just trying to get away and they don't know which direction. So sometimes it can seem like they're trying to chase you and they're just going in the same direction as you. Any other questions?
How effective is putting out little toad houses for the toads or the frogs?
I would say pretty effective. I've seen a lot of people do the green tree frog little houses on their front porches, and it seems like they really like it. So, and that's another one of those things I would try it and see if they like it in your area. Because I could say, you know, maybe at my house it wouldn't work, but maybe at your house it would. So it doesn't ever hurt to try, especially when it comes to, you know, wildlife management. Yeah, one size does not fit all when wildlife kind of comes into play. Anything else? Y'all have had very good questions. I've really enjoyed it. Did you have one?
Yeah, do you have any advice of, like, we just live in a little lot in suburbia. Do you have any advice of, like, how we can help the animals, if at all?
You know, I would say wildscaping. If you're living more in a suburban area where, you know, you don't have that forested aspect of things, yeah, maybe do a little bit more wildscaping. And I know a lot of people don't like it in their yards, but as leaf litter does fall from your trees, I would leave it. A lot of people want to rake it, but that is, even in a small yard, that is a microhabitat, and a lot of things are relying on that. I mean, even besides reptiles and amphibians, insects specifically, so your pollinators are going to use that. So whether you're, you know, directly impacting herpetofauna or not, I mean, you're still serving other great wildlife. Yeah.
I've been reading that, so, you know, they have those big stacks of wood out in the woods.
Yes.
Places. But if just a little stack, even
Yep.
just, you know, maybe 2 feet across, a little stack of maybe some wood, a little bit of bigger pieces, and then sticks,
Tree limbs,
and
yeah.
leaf litter on top of it.
Yep.
And that will, if nothing else, will provide winter habitat
Yep.
for bumblebees.
Yep, bumblebees, yeah, and different kinds of butterfly species will use it as well. Yeah,
So
I
you
completely
can, in
agree.
a small yard, and just
You
a
can do a
few
lot.
native plants will attract
Yep.
insects that might be
I hear it all the time. Landowners will be like, well, I only have, you know, X amount of area, or, you know, I live more in an urban interface area, but there's so much you can still do, especially where we live. We are on that flyover zone. So, you know, different birds, especially the, you know, insect aspect of things with monarchs, we are in that central flyaway, and they are gonna come and they're gonna do stopovers in this area. So, you know, keeping that wildscape and keeping, you know, those little micro habitats readily available for them to use, I mean, does wonders.
Good to know. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys.